Hey everybody, Tom here, and today I want to give you some tips for teaching Century Eastern Wonders. I have already showed you how to set up and how to play that game. If you didn't see that, or if you're interested in seeing that, who knows? I have put the links for those videos in the description of this video, so you can just click on down there. But for now, I basically want to give some tips for how to teach this game. But let me start off by saying, I realize that this is a very simple game for those of us who are on YouTube watching teaching tip videos about board games. So people like me would not really need a how to teach this game video. The game is simple enough. So where I want to focus my energy is on in this video is how to teach this game to people you're trying to bring into the hobby. So if you're going to go try this game out with your gamer friends, you probably don't need the tips I'm about to share. You really could just lay out the game, explain the rules, and you're done. Like nothing else. But like I said, the tips that I'm giving in this video are going to be focused on how to use this game and teach this game in a way that will be more inviting for people to try to bring people into the hobby rather than turning them away. So with no further ado, let's start with tip number 1, which is about our audience. When choosing an appropriate audience for this game, it's important to remember that this is a great gateway game. That's not to say that you can't play this with more experienced gamers by any means, but if you want to bring people into the hobby, specifically if you have friends who know that you like games or colleagues or whatever, and their biggest exposure to board gaming is Monopoly and Risk, and you want to show them, hey, games these days are completely different. This is a game for you, and that's why we call it a gateway game, right? And so this is a game that you can use to bring people into the hobby. It's not the only game. I think you could bring a lot of games to a game night like this, but when choosing an audience, again, I'm going to be making this video about assuming that you're using this as a gateway game to bring people in. Now, having said that, I actually don't think that this is a great game for kids. And not to say that kids can't understand the game and play the game. I think that they can. I think they could be successful. I think they might enjoy it. But for the most part, the fact that it is extremely themeless and you're literally exchanging cubes for the whole game is going to probably mean that this isn't a great game to be playing with nieces and nephews, but this is a good game to be playing with siblings, for example. So keep that in mind, that this is not necessarily a kid's game, but that this is a great game to bring colleagues in to the hobby, for example, or maybe grown-up neighbors and things like that. The other thing that I want to say about the people that you're choosing to play this game with is usually when people start asking me about games and I start talking about games and they say, ooh, I want to learn how to play one of these modern board games. I usually have like almost like a questionnaire, a bunch of questions I go through to pick the perfect game for the people. If you have friends or family who are interested in fantasy or in sci-fi or in horror, I think that there are other games that might be more welcoming for those people to bring them into the hobby. I think that this is the perfect game if you have people that you know could not give two craps about fantasy or sci-fi or horror or zombies or whatever. If you are just talking to somebody and you're like, well, what kinds of things do you like to do? If you have people who watch Dawson's Creek on TV, I don't know why that example came to my mind, but people who don't necessarily need a theme but do need their microphone battery to stay on. If you if you have people who don't necessarily need a theme to bring them into gaming or just don't really care about the nerdier themes of life, this is a great game for you to do that. So appropriate audiences, adults who don't really have thematic interest in stronger other kinds of themes. This is a good one for you. Tip number 2 is going to be about the setup of the game. And yes, please let people help you set this game up. Specifically, I think that you should be letting them help you, like this could be a cooperative effort to set up the main part of the board, the big island. So like you can get the tiles all shuffled, remove the tiles that you don't need. You don't need to tell them about that. You can remove the ports. So you just hand them the stack of tiles or whatever and you say, hey, mix these up, and then I need you to put 6 in a line. And then after they have the 6 in a line and you maybe are doing something else, or maybe you're helping them put the 6 in the line, then you say, cool, put 5 on this side and 5 on this side. And again, you're doing maybe setting up your special tiles, or who knows what you're doing. You could be setting up the other 5 while they're doing the 5. And then, put the 2 in the middle. And where this is important because when you look at that main island, all you see are all of these different cubes. I think a person brand new coming into the game would look at that whole island and probably not quickly or easily distinguish the port tiles with the little scoring tiles on there from the market tiles. But by letting them help set up the island, they're going to know, okay, all of these tiles are one way. I know that because I shuffled them all together and just put them out there. But these 4 tiles serve a different purpose. I can see how they look a little bit different because you're putting them out and you're putting on the scoring marker and stuff like that. So definitely let them help you set up the island. I don't think they need to help mix up the port tiles necessarily. I think you could be mixing up the port tiles while they're setting up the island. So you're taking the port tiles while kind of instructing them on the island parts. And sorry, I notice I close my eyes a lot while I do this. I am not trained in front of a camera, but we're going to keep talking. So port tiles, get those all shuffled up. You don't even need to tell them about the one with the big X until the X comes up. I'm going to talk more about that later. But yeah, let them help you or let them set up the main part of the island with your guidance for sure so that they can distinguish the difference between market tiles and port tiles. Tip number 3, this is going to be the big one, is about rules explanation. Now, you're inviting people in. The problem is that you're going to have a lot of people trying to come into the hobby who have this misconception, well, it's kind of a true conception, right? This idea that modern games or the board games are just super long and super complicated and they don't have time to listen to tons and tons of rules. So with that said, the amount of time you spend explaining the rules and how you explain the rules are extremely important for their first dish exposure. You know, maybe you've played a card game before, but this is them sitting down for a board game. It's going to be really, really important. I actually think that your rules explanation needs to start when you're picking starting tiles. So during the setup, there's that moment where you lay out the starting tiles, or not the starting tiles, I apologize, the starting cubes. And so you have the 4 different groups of starting cubes, and they might say, which one do I pick? And you're going to tell them it really doesn't matter because we know point-wise it doesn't matter. But they're not going to know that. So you just say, I don't know, pick one. And maybe they're going to pick the 4 yellow cubes because it looks like more. That's awesome. That's great. That's perfect. Let them do it. Okay, so you're going to let them pick that. And then you're going to start teaching them while they're placing their first ship. So for me, this is going to be one of those games where you can go last. The rules are simple enough that you can really guide people. And in the rule book, it says that you should go in reverse turn order as you're picking these things. I don't think you necessarily need to do that. I think you can just go in turn order from setup all the way through because nobody knows what they're doing except for you. And if you grab a pile, they're going to instantly say, well, why did he pick that pile? Did he pick the best pile? So you just let the person to your left take the first starting one and you just go around and then you're going to let them start the game too. Okay, so my first advice is let them pick their starting cubes. What you're going to do is you're going to start explaining the game when they're choosing the place to put their ship. Don't let them just put it anywhere. Look at their starting tiles, figure out in your brain 1 or 2 good places for them to put their starting ship. And you're going to say to them, here is what we're doing in this game. In this game, you're going to be taking the cubes you have on your player board and you're going to be sailing your ship to different places so that you can exchange those cubes out for different ships. So, if you are starting out with these 4 yellow cubes, let's look at some places that start off with only yellow cubes that you can have a good exchange to start the game off. And so you're going to point out those places where they can start off with their yellow cubes, or whichever colors they choose, right? You're just going to try to keep an eye out. Hey, look, this tile over here exchanges your green cube for these other cubes. That's a good place for you to go. And so especially, like, I don't think that you need to choose places for them to start. Maybe try to find 2 options. Say, hey, I think you could start here and you could start here successfully, and then that would be a good thing. So as they're setting those things, you're explaining the top part of this flag shows the cubes that you have, and then you're going to exchange them for the bottom parts of these. And while you're doing that and people are placing these things, start to point out, and in the 4 corners over here, we have something called a port tile, and here's a scoring token. So in this game, you're trying to score points, and the best way you're going to score points is by exchanging all of these cubes throughout the game until eventually you hold up the token, you have these cubes here. If you can get your boat over to this space, you're going to score these points. So that's kind of how you're going to start your rules explanation. Rules explanations starts at the end of setup when you're picking your starting cubes and your starting place for your boat. After that, of course, you're going to start talking about points because you just held up points. Hey, look, points in this game look like this. And you hold it up and you show the teal color for the points. So the best way to score points during this game is to move your ship into one of these corners. You're going to discard your cubes and you're going to get a whole bunch of points. That's the most common way to score points. There's a couple other ways to score points though. And then you're going to kind of show them that over here on the side of the board you have these maroon shaped tiles. Throughout the game, there's going to be something that happens. You're going to be able to pick these up. These are like special powers, and these are some points that you can see here. You can see it's the same teal color, right? So it's a flow thing, right? You're starting at the board, and right next to the board here are some more point opportunities you could tell from this teal color. And then from there, the rule of the way you get these special abilities is by, and you come over to the player board, you're going to be moving these out. They're not outhouses, they're outposts. You're going to be putting these outposts onto the island. We'll talk about more about that in a second. But if you clear out a whole column, look, this icon right here means that you get to pick up one of these special ability tiles. Okay, so there's this nice flow. You start with port points, then you go to special ability points, and oh yeah, now we're talking about how you're going from these special abilities is bringing us over to your board with these outposts, not outhouses, and then you start to reveal those numbers. And just between you and me, I wish those numbers had that stupid icon. Like, why didn't they make it teal colored? I have no idea. I wish they would have. But then you reveal, hey, look, there are these numbers underneath these. And so if you can actually remove these are also going to be points at the end of the game. And then after that, I just really briefly, I don't get into details. I don't talk about the color yellow. I just say, oh, and also cubes that you have at the end of the game, those might be worth some points at the end too. But there's such a minor thing that I don't dwell on it. In fact, I even forgot to say it in my video because I'm just so dumb. But yeah, I keep that for just very end, just kind of like a woo-woo thing. Now, continuing on with those same lines, we're talking about rules explanations. I actually believe that the majority of this game can and should be taught between rounds or during the round. So to get them playing quickly, you've just explained points and you've really generally said, hey, these outposts are going to end up on the board. And once these outposts are on the board, these are ways to score points. So during the first round, maybe the first 2 rounds, you're just showing them the basics of, hey, it's your turn. You have the option to move. The first round, I wouldn't even mention moving because you have placed their ship on a place. Hey, on your turn, what you need to do is you need to get an outpost here. So you start talking about outposts and exchanges. In order to do this exchange, you have to have an outpost. You could choose to talk about having multiple outposts on there if you want to or not. I actually think that's a question that comes up naturally when someone will say, well, can you build an outpost where someone else does? Yeah, you can, but you're going to have to pay for it. That kind of a thing. So you're using the first round to talk about outposts and to talk about exchanging. Okay? Then in the first, maybe after the first round, maybe after the second round, I think the natural question, if people are kind of coming along with you, will be, well, what do you do if you can't make any of these exchanges? Then you say, oh, okay, so on your turn, you could do 3 things. You can, put an outpost here so you can use the market, or you can exchange points, like we talked about already, or if you don't have anything else better that you can do, you could just, from any tile on the whole board, draw 2 yellow cubes. So you're kind of talking about the harvest after or during the second round is probably a good plan. Then, I wouldn't even talk about specialty tiles. You've briefly mentioned specialty tiles. Don't talk about what abilities they give until it is time for someone to see it. So once they get that column cleared off, then you say, cool, you want to learn about special abilities. Here's what those special abilities are. And the reason why I always wait is, first of all, if they ask, they're going to remember better. But second of all, you could spout out all of those special abilities, and I think the only one that makes sense is having the extra spaces, like the 3 extra spaces. Other than that, maybe the points ones. But the other 2 are a little confusing for a brand new gamer who hasn't been playing this game yet. So save the special ability tiles until someone is ready to get their first special ability tile. There's also the blocked port. So the port with the X on it, I think it's easy to fall into the trap of trying to explain the movement of that thing early on. There is absolutely no reason to. That's going to come out after a couple of rounds. You show that X and you say, oh, okay, here's an interesting part of the game is that this port is now closed. And so we're going to see this closed port thing move around the board. We'll talk more about that in a second. So hold off on talking about the closed port. That's why I was even saying you are the one that should be in charge of setting up the port thing so that it doesn't even have to come up until it's ready to come up. And finally, I would save explaining the cube scoring for near the end. I would say probably when someone has picked up their third port scoring tile, because that's getting kind of close to the end of the game. That's the time when people are going to start thinking to themselves, can I get one more scoring tile or not? If not, maybe they want to go around and try to get as many non-yellow tiles as possible. So mention that you can score cubes at the end of the game, but don't really explain it until the third-ish port tile, not the third one in the whole game, but as soon as someone has picked up their third port tile. I think that that's a good time to mention, hey, we're getting close to the end of the game. If you don't think you're going to be able to get another one of these scoring tiles, you may want to try to find ways to start getting non-yellow cubes. Those are going to be worth 1 point each at the end of the game. And the reason why I say that is because sometimes for me, when I get explaining, I did this in the video too, I get caught up in the numerical stuff. I'm like, oh, I said this in the video. Yellow is worth 1 point, red is worth 2, green is worth 3. I don't want that to get confused in the scoring. All non-yellow cubes are worth 1 point at the end of the game. And so by saving that information to the end, I think it's a little less confusing. Okay, so tip number 5 is, we've talked about how to teach the game. I think that you should be in good shape. Hopefully these tips were semi-helpful for you. But what I wanted to talk about now is a pitfall that I still fall into all of the time. Okay, so my post-game tip is, I would not force any other play of any game, including this one, after that game. People expressed interest. They wanted to see what games were like. They have now seen what games are like. Don't force them to play this game again, and don't force them to play another game. I think we get really excited and we're like, we're going to show you this and you're going to love it so much, and we're going to play this game and then this one and this one. And I think that can be scary and overwhelming. So my advice is, have in your mind that we're going to play one round of this game, and then that might be the end of it. Maybe they just want to chat after that. Maybe they want to have some drinks. Maybe they want to watch a movie. And that has to be okay with you. Don't let that be a moment for you to get frustrated or disappointed. So just plan on, maybe this will be the only gameplay. My next bit of advice is, if you're having people over and you're trying to choose between Spice Road and this game, my advice is, Eastern Wonders is the game to play before you play Spice Road. So, yeah, that's what I have to say about that. Use this one before you use Spice Road if the options are there. And the reason why I say that is, I think that Spice Road is a great game. I actually think it's probably on a very similar level of complexity. But the problem with Spice Road is that it's pretty punishing if you're not picking up the right cards at the right time. And so if you're teaching the rules to Spice Road and can you see I'm petting my dog right now? That's still on this side. Okay, if you're trying to teach the rules of Spice Road and people are picking up not great cards just for whatever reason, that's going to really hurt their score at the end. I don't think that there's a lot of wrong moves that you can make in Eastern Wonders. So that's why I'm saying save Spice Road. Not even for after this game. Like, don't play it the same night. I'm saying hold on to Spice Road for night 2 or night 3 that you're going to play some games. Because you don't really want to bring people into the hobby by saying, look at all of these games that are almost identical to one another. But you may want to say something like, hey, if you liked Eastern Wonders, this one adds like a nice layer of planning and engine building, and maybe you might enjoy this. And don't use the word engine building because that won't make sense to them. But you can kind of use that type of jargon, I guess. You know what I'm saying. My next piece of advice is almost more for me than it is for anybody else. And that is, recommend playing this game again. I fall into this trap all the time. I get so excited when I know that I have people coming over that I get my freaking 20 game stack, or I bring my bag of 1,000,000 games, and I'm like, look at all these games. We're only going to play one or two. But you got to keep it in mind. These people are new. They might get overwhelmed. So when you're done playing this game, don't say, oh, if you like that game, here's a different game that we could also play. I would probably try to promote, hey, now you got the hang of it. Let's play again and see if we can do a little bit better. Let's try to beat our score. I want to see if we can find better places. And you hurry and shuffle up the island. Don't make it a big to-do. And you just start over again. So at least recommend starting again. And if they don't want to, that has got to be okay with you. There's a chance that they actually want to try a different game. Maybe they have a really good experience, but rather than trying that one again, or maybe after you play that one again, they're like, hey, what other kinds of things are modern games doing? But rather than having your mountain of games, my recommendation is try to just stick with one or my recommendation is 2 backup games ready to go after you finish Eastern Wonders, or maybe just for the whole night. You have 3 games to choose from. Depending on the mood and the feeling of the room, you got to kind of feel that out. If you want to try something similar, probably pull out a Splendor. Like Splendor would be a great, very similar game. You know, it has a very similar feel. It might be too similar, but that's what we're doing, right? We're picking a game that's similar. Splendor would be another great one. Or Reef, that's coming out soon. I think that that might be another great game where it's kind of just manipulating these cube-like things, but using these cards. And so maybe having a Splendor or a Reef, something that has a similar feel, not Spice Road, to Eastern Wonders is a good idea for one of your 2 games. The other of the 2 games, maybe you want, try to not do it, right? I'm even doing it here talking to you, is to have something totally different, but still gateway. Don't think that after 1 round of Eastern Wonders that they're going to be ready for a next step game. That's not true. So keep it simple. Some ideas that I have for that are Topiary. Topiary is a very fun, spatial game. It's still competitive. Or maybe you want to do Azul, right? Azul is kind of a great game. Those are 2 competitive games. Have those around maybe, but my even stronger recommendation is go cooperative. You're having a game night, you really want to show them what modern board gaming looks like, you pull out a cooperative board game because they didn't know that existed, because it didn't exist when we were younger. And so maybe some ideas for that would be Fuse, a real-time cooperative game that is so much fun and so fast to play. Burgle Bros. Burgle Bros is heavier than the things that we've been talking about, but where it's cooperative, and I think it's kind of simple, like, that's a heavier recommendation, but Burgle Bros for me has always been successful at showing people how cool and fun cooperative games are that are not the typical themes that we've been talking about. So things like that, be ready. So my suggestion is Eastern Wonders, a backup game that's similar to Eastern Wonders if they want to try something similar, and a backup game that is completely different, preferably a cooperative game. And my final tip for you tonight, I don't even have another fancy page. Tip number 6 is let them pace out the next gaming session. Again, I get so excited. This is just like me on dating too. I'm like, oh, but that was a really good date. Should we be going on another date tomorrow? I'm really confused by this. And this is why I'm still single. So, among other reasons, I'm sure. But I'm saying let them pace this out. Keep it keep it as an open option. Mention it once in a while, but don't force them to have another game night immediately. Some people, once in a while, will be as excited about board gaming as you and I are. But for the most part, they're going to kind of gradually come into it. And I'm finding most people really do like it very casually, but that doesn't mean that they're going to get super into it and that every time that you hang out that you want to bring one. And so my recommendation for going at your own pace is if you're going to go out and do something different, put 1, 2, maybe 3 games in the trunk of your car. You don't need to bring it into the house. But if by chance, while you're hanging out doing whatever people do, I have no idea. What do adults do when they hang out? I don't really do that. So I just play games with gamers. But as you're casually hanging out, if somebody's like, do you know what? Last time when we played that game, that was fun. You'd be like, I happen to have 1 or 2 games. I happen to have a game in my car. Do you want me to bring it in or not? So let them pace out their next gaming session so that you can bring them in to the fold. And so there you have it. Those are my 7 tips. They were really 3 tips for teaching Century Eastern Wonders and 4 tips for teaching gateway gamers in general. But I figured that this might be the right opportunity to do that. So hopefully this was semi-helpful for you. If you enjoyed that, let me know in the comments. That would be cool. Thumbs ups always make me feel happier than a thumbs down, but I understand why people thumbs down. That's fine. I'm trying to get over it. But yes, so thank you for watching this teaching tips video for Century Eastern Wonders. I hope to see you in a different teaching tips video. If by chance you haven't seen, I have 10 general rules for teaching games to anybody. I will put a link to that in the description of this video so you can see it if by chance that's of interest to you. Thanks again for watching. I will see you guys later. Bye!